to Announcers On. I'm Dave Sims from the Seattle Mariners, joined by my co-host Boog Sciambi from ESPN, the Sunday night radio voice. And today we are delighted to have one of our good friends, Brian Anderson, 14-year voice, TV voice of the Milwaukee Brewers, joining us right now. Hey, BA, how you doing, man?
Oh, it's great to be with you guys, man. I missed your voices. So I'm glad we get to do a Zoom chat together. And I mostly missed Boog's hair. Wow. That is awesome salad.
Yeah.
Show it off, Boog.
Your hair looks great too, Dave.
Yeah,
I'm not taunting.
Thank you, Gillette.
I'm not taunting.
BA, walk us through. How have you been getting through this whole thing?
Oh, man. So parallel tracks, right? Okay, I'm really consumed by just our healthcare workers and people on the front lines, and including a couple of my neighbors. My next door neighbor is the head of infectious disease for a couple of hospitals, and man, I'm just kind of living through him and just, watching his work days. He's out before sunrise and he gets back after sunset. So consumed with that and trying to do my part to stay home. That's one parallel track. The other one is I'm having a blast. I mean, I'm loving staying home, and we travel so much doing our jobs. It's been incredible, really, like maybe life-changing to be home and to fully engage with my family, my wife and daughter. Now, we're giving each other space too, but just to be part of the home cycle of events. We've been doing projects. We've cooked a lot. We've just, been binge watching shows together, and it's really been great, man. I feel a little guilty about that because I've been gone so long in my life, but I'm really enjoying this time. I know that ultimately there are going to be games again, and my worlds could collide in a big way with the NBA and potentially baseball coming back together, and then that's just going to be, one of those moments where you don't come up for air for a while. So I'm just trying to stay in the moment and embrace the suck, as Brene Brown would say, and enjoying just being present here at home.
There's a really good Brene Brown podcast out with this guy, Mark Brackett, I think is his name, about like what you're feeling during this time.
Oh,
it's a little.
I listened to that one. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Mental health, mental illness is. That's kind of where I've been diving into, especially Boog and Dave. Like we get all these links for young announcers, and they want us to listen to their tape. So I've actually really jumped into that part of it, and I've enjoyed it. And I'm trying to tell these young broadcasters, all the mechanic stuff, like you'll figure that out. And I give them some tips, but it's the mental warfare that you go through. And that podcast you mentioned, Boog, really helped me define some things for these young broadcasters. You have to, especially if it's your first time doing something, and that's the part nobody ever talks about, like the shame in it all and putting yourself out there in a public space and being vulnerable with it all. So it's really been a deep dive into, psychology and all of that during this time for me.
Yeah, a lot of times I tell kids in college when I hear from them, get involved with the theater department.
No doubt.
In terms of getting in touch with yourself, being able to, put yourself out there and get used to the sound of your voice, how you look, and working with other people. And I think the Brene Brown thing, I haven't checked that out. I've seen multiple features on her, but I'm glad you brought that up. That is a good piece of information. You mentioned something, Brian, about your two worlds could collide, the baseball and the basketball. You've been with TBS and doing games there, TNT, college hoops. You were ready to do college hoop, the NCAA tournament a few weeks ago, and then boom, they pulled the rug right out from under you. You were right on site that day, right?
Yeah, I was at the Big Ten tournament for that. I had just done an NBA game in San Antonio for TNT, and it was a packed arena. This was Tuesday, March 10th. That was the first day they'd kind of set the physical distancing with the media. So we had no access to players. I remember interviewing Greg Popovich, and he was sitting about 10 feet away. And I was there with Jim Jackson, and Chris Haynes was our reporter, and we were all 6 feet apart and 10 feet away from him. So we were basically taking up this whole room. and thinking like, wow, this is really strange right here. Now it just seems so normal. It was only a month and a half ago. We did that game. I flew to Indianapolis to do the Big Ten tournament. I was on the floor. The teams were on the floor, Michigan and Rutgers in the layup lines. This was the day after Fred Hoiberg left the bench with Nebraska. And, of course, that same day, that Wednesday, was when Rudy Gobert tested positive. They quarantined the Jazz. They had quarantined the Nebraska Huskers at the arena in Indianapolis. So, anyway, we show up Thursday ready to do a game in front of no fans. And I was really kind of thinking about that from a stylistic perspective. And all I kept thinking about was that Happy Days episode. Remember when Potsy was the PA announcer and Richie Cunningham is at the free throw line? And Potsy's like giving play-by-play, and Richie's totally freaked out and steps off and like yells at him. I think that's what's going to happen to me today. Somebody's going to step off the free throw line and yell at me for saying they're a bad free throw shooter. But they didn't play the game. I went straight to Avis. I rented a car. I drove home 5 hours, and I've been home ever since. I think I've left my house 4 times. That was March 12th.
Wow. Take me through a little bit of the process. Like, where in the process did you decide that a razor wasn't going to collide with your face?
I shaved once, and so this is probably post that shave. I noticed, Boog, this is crazy.
I know.
My beard is the same color as your hair, minus this gray patch right here. I don't understand it. It makes me look like – so people think when I grow a beard, they go, well, you must color your hair, which I don't. I have plenty of gray hair, but it's not part of me. It doesn't even look like the same person. I've got some Irish in my background, my lineage, and I'm sure my brother's redheaded, so I think, it's probably in there somewhere, but it doesn't make sense. I can't really grow. I'm going to probably take this down tonight. So we got a big Brewers happy hour, virtual happy hour. So, I got to get cleaned up for that big event.
So who's in that? Who's in the big Brewers happy hour?
Oh, all-star cast. By the way, you two are both on the list of potential subjects if this thing goes well. So tonight, everybody's available. Believe me, we're bringing in random guests.
Loaded bullpen. So the bullpen is full on ready.
That's right. We're ready to go. If somebody gets a freeze up or a bad connection, it's the next man. So tonight, I don't know when this is airing, but Thursday night, Brewers Virtual Happy Hour is Robin Yount. He is in the Hall of Fame, as you know. He's a famous Brewer. He was kind of the one guy that you needed right away to get this thing started, right? That's the hook.
Sure.
David Stearns will be on, so he's the GM.
He's a New York guy.
He's a New York guy, and I think he's almost 30 now, so he's legal to drink, so that'll be good for him. And then Brandon Woodruff, the no-name ace of the Brewers, who once homered off Clayton Kershaw in the NLCS and was going to be the Brewers opening day starter. He is there. And then a special musical guest. We couldn't have a Miller virtual happy hour without Rhett Miller, who is a New Yorker, and he's the front man for the band, the Old 97s, one of my favorite bands. Rhett's one of my favorite artists. Wow. He's been doing these Stage It shows. God, you got to watch. You got to go in there. He's not even charging for tickets. You can tip him when you're in there, but stageit.com, they're having these concerts at home, these artists. It is unreal. It's amazing. And Rhett's doing like 4 a week. He's literally playing entire albums in succession. So he's a huge baseball fan. He loves both of you guys, by the way. He watches. He's very close with Eric Nadel. He's a Texas guy. Loves the Rangers, loves the Brewers. So he'll be on tonight with us, and he's going to play a couple of songs. So it's going to be awesome.
That's awesome. That's really so.
A happy hour.
If you throw this at him, just tell him. And I like the old 97s a lot, but how I got to know him, you guys both know I do a lot of work in the ALS space.
Yeah. My
friend Tim Sheehy, who went to the University of South Carolina, he died of ALS 2007. But Tim went. So he was a big musical influence. We've known each other since we were 7. But old 97s. Probably one of his favorite bands. Absolutely love them.
I will tell him that. I'll connect you guys, Boog. He's a huge fan of yours. He watches so many games on those tour buses. That's all he does. He watches ball games. He listens.
Love them. That's so cool.
He's as genuine as it gets, too. So we got to dial up a musical act. You know, Boog, that's a good point. I want to do something with your charity too, with because I know you've done an amazing job, man, with the ALS outreach, and so I want to do something on at least our next one. Too late to do it today, but I want to do something with you on that because I think a lot of people, Dave, are looking for avenues to help right now if they're so inclined. And so I love what you're doing, Boog, man. Good on you.
Yeah, when you mentioned ALS, it reminds me of doing the Atlanta at New Orleans football game when they reopened the dome and Steve Gleason blocked that punt, got him going. And I remember I was in the opposite end zone in the Westwood One booth. I could barely see it.
Yep.
But every time I think of ALS anymore in this recent context, it's always thinking about Steve Gleason.
So Dave, Steve Gleason and Team Gleason, they partner with our charity project, Main Street, for our event that unfortunately had to be postponed at the end of the year. Steve's come a couple of times. He's come and he's spoken, and he's been amazing. Yeah, BA, I would love to, do something with you guys. I'd love to definitely to meet Rhett. So that'll be a lot of fun. I want to ask you about just let's go baseball for a second, some of your background. Like you come from a baseball family. Talk a little bit about your brother, and then, you played as a kid and growing up. Give me a little bit of your background, like before broadcasting and just, baseball and golf too, but baseball runs through your veins, man.
It does. It definitely does. And I would go back to, my grandfather was one of those guys who had the transistor radio every day, every game. He was a huge Texas Rangers fan. So he grew up in this little town in Central Texas. So and my dad was the same way. My dad didn't play, wasn't an athlete. But he loved the game and he listened to the game all the time. So as I was coming up, my brother and I, so my brother Mike is 5 years older. He's currently assistant to the GM with the Texas Rangers. He's a scout. He's kind of a pitching liaison. So he's a pitching guy. He goes in and goes to pitching targets. He was very instrumental in Yu Darvish becoming a Ranger. So that's part of his, his past, his history with the Rangers. He's still with Texas. He's 5 years older. He pitched in the big leagues with the Reds, most famously known for the Mark Whitten game. Mark Whitten hit 4 homers and, drove in 12 runs. That was my brother's major league debut. He gave up 2 of those home runs. So they play that every year on MLB Network, and I always make sure I take a few pictures and send it to him. But he's an incredible story. Right? Yeah. My older brother is such a huge inspiration, man. Boog knows him well, and I know you've met him too, Dave, but he signed out of a tryout camp, a cattle call with the Cincinnati Reds. There were 250 kids there in just our little area, and his college career was over. He pitched on the same staff as Mike Timlin in college at this little university in Texas, Southwestern University. They were on the same staff. Timlin was a huge, high draft pick, and, you thought he might have a chance to be a star, which he became. Mike had a so-so career and didn't get drafted, and was going in to be a stockbroker. And next thing you know, he's like, I want to give this one more shot. And whatever happened, he figured out mechanically what was going on. He had been trained. I was a catcher too. So I was still in high school and I was catching him, and he just kind of unlocked something mechanically. And he ended up getting signed. Chuck Lamar was the area scout at the time, became the Rays GM. Not to tell my brother's story, but in the context of my life, it's huge because I'm in high school. My brother signs with the Reds for $1,000. This is 3 weeks after the draft, right? The Wolf's at the door for him the whole way. He ends up making it to the big leagues. So he was drafted, I want to say in 88, and he made it to the big leagues in 93. And that accomplishment alone was life-changing for him and me. Just to see, you hear that phrase paper ceilings, where we don't know how high we can go. He busted through that paper ceiling because he was willing to put himself out there. And that opened huge doors for me, because as he was going through the minor leagues, I would go stay with him for months at a time in whatever city he was in, Greensboro, North Carolina, Billings, Montana, Chattanooga.
Wow.
And at that time I was still playing, and I was a good enough player to get a scholarship. I was a scholarship athlete at an NAIA school, and I played college ball. But my brother was going through this trek, and I was able to go with him the whole way, you know, and I was able to get to know the broadcasters and go sit in a booth with these guys like Kurt Bloom and Larry Ward. And they were gracious to let me in. And then when Mike got called up, I kind of did the same thing. And I was like, well, who's the broadcaster of the Cincinnati Reds? Well, that's Joe Nuxhall and Marty Brenneman. So, all right, well, can you introduce me? I'm sure they'll let me come up too. Not knowing like what any of this was about. And so, but they did. And Marty ended up becoming a huge mentor. So then that was my trek, mostly because, you know, my grandfather's love for the game translated to my dad, my brother being in the game, not even coming to the game until probably his junior year, seriously until his junior year in high school. And then to make it to the big leagues, literally 7 years later. And that Mark Whitten game, he takes a lot of grief over that, but I'm telling you, man, that was one of the greatest moments in my life and my family's lives, because he accomplished something that is so unusual and rare that it was like, whoa. And I remember Jack Buck saying, we're from Georgetown, Texas. And I was listening on the radio to that game. You could pick up KMOX in my town, believe it or not. And Jack Buck said, well, no calls to Georgetown tonight for Mike Anderson. Meaning like he's so embarrassed he wouldn't call. And I always wanted to tell Jack, hardly, just the opposite. We were so proud of him. And he's been a huge part when I got a minor league broadcasting job in '94 after I graduated from college. He was the first call I made, like, what do I do? How do I do this? He told me how to pack. He taught me how to be present. He taught me when to get lost, which, as you guys know, is probably the biggest piece to the puzzle, when to get lost. Don't walk through a closed door, especially the manager's door. He taught me all like the underground etiquette rules of existing with a professional baseball team. So yeah, baseball is definitely my comfort zone, but a lot of it has to do with my older brother.
Wow, that's a heck of a story, and I like what you said about the unwritten rules. I once approached Steve Carlton when I was an intern in 1974, and it was my first night going to be writing the game story, but nobody told me you don't approach tonight's starting pitcher. And he gave me a look of death when I introduced myself to him before that game. I'll never forget it. So it's good that you learned those little intimate details or intricate details, and I'm sure you pass them along to the kids you talk to. Tell me about how, when you got to the Brewers, what was that? Who made that call? How did that happen?
Ooh, I haven't really shared much of this story because he doesn't like to have it told, but it was Matt Vasgersian and I were in the minor leagues together. My first year in the Texas League in San Antonio was his last in the Texas League. That was 1994. He would go on and bounce to a few different places, but he obviously ended up getting hired by the Brewers in 97. So fast forward a little bit. Now it's 2006. I have left baseball. I'm out of it. I had been in minor league baseball for 9 years. I was dying in the Texas League, man. I felt like I was good enough to be a big league announcer, and I was getting that kind of feedback, and but I couldn't get a job. I couldn't get a sniff. I wasn't even. There were very few interviews even. So I decided to take a shot and leave baseball. So at the time I was working 2 6-month calendar, basically schedules, minor league baseball this 6 months. And then I was the Spurs sideline reporter. So I had made my way on television with the San Antonio Spurs and Fox Sports Southwest for the other 6 months. So that actually got me a little bit of traction. I had done a few games for ESPN, like Little League regional games. I'd done some basketball, college basketball with them and Fox Southwest. So the Golf Channel, the guy at the Golf Channel was with ABC Sports, ABC, ESPN. This is back when ABC, there was a real network that actually ran sports, as you guys remember. And he went to the Golf Channel. So he had kind of known me and remembered me from those ESPN days. Long story short, he hired me at Golf Channel to call golf events. They had a brand new tour that they were developing called the Nationwide Tour. It's no longer named that anymore, but that was like the developmental tour. And it was a big TV package, man. And it put me on television 4 days a week for 25 weeks. So we were doing all 4 rounds, 3-hour broadcast. And at that time, this is 2003. I mean, you talk about like a window of time with these unbelievable players that were nationwide tour players that became stars. Like, I mean, Zach Johnson and Lucas Glover and Ryan Palmer and, I mean, major championship winners, Jimmy Walker. They were all on that tour at that time. And it was very much like the minor league setting where we're hanging out with these guys every week. We got to know all the tour officials, the guys in the truck. It was great. So I had left baseball. I was content the rest of my life to stay in golf and be a golf announcer. I loved it. I loved the sport. And then Matt Vasgersian called me, and I had no intentions whatsoever of leaving golf and going into baseball. But he goes, bro, he goes, he's in San Diego at this point. This is 2006. He goes, the Diamondbacks, I think Tom Brenneman must have gone to Cincinnati. So the Diamondbacks had a job open. So now Matt, they want Matt to be their announcer. And he's like, bro, I'm turning it down. I don't want to go to Arizona. I'm going to stay in San Diego. He goes, I go, okay, great. He goes, yeah, but I think they like Darren Sutton. I go, okay. I don't know Darren. I don't even know what that means. Why are you telling me that? He goes, oh, because Darren was in Milwaukee, and he's probably going to go to Arizona. That means there's a job in Milwaukee, and I've already told him about you. I was like, oh, man, now I'm pretty happy here, man. I don't want to go do that. He goes, just send a tape. So anyway, I sent a demo in before there was even a job open in Milwaukee.
Oh, wow.
And I can remember, like, the media writer in Milwaukee has all these names of guys that are potential candidates, and he called Matt. And this guy's retired now, so I'm sure he won't mind telling the story. But he calls Matt. And Matt, in just a total moment of propaganda with no substance whatsoever, goes, you know, I think the Brewers really like this guy, Brian Anderson. He's like, who? His name wasn't on the list. And I wasn't, man. I was in file 19 until that article came out. And so this article comes out, and I'm sure, like, the Brewers brass told me later, like, they're like, wait, who's this guy? And they literally went through the pile and said, he's a minor league guy. We better put him in the pile. Then it was like, 150, and then it was to 20, and then I kept kind of surviving. And I was a golf guy, and so I ended up going for an interview. And I remember leaving Q school. I did Q school with Peter Osterhaus in Palm Springs, and then I went to Milwaukee. This is in December. And did the interview, did an audition, had 9 hours of auditions. And I was like, I'm never taking this job. It's Milwaukee.
9 hours?
9 hours. Multiple people coming through there. We had a lunch, obviously. Everybody in every department head came through there. And so I ended up getting offered the job Christmas Eve of 2006 for the 2007 season. And man, I cried. It was like dream come true. And I've been here ever since, my 14th year. And I have Matt to thank in a great deal. But, once we kind of got the interview process going, and I put all my golf on cameras on my demo, all those weeks and for 4 years of being on camera and having to, like, deliver on camera. And then I put my radio play-by-play of baseball, which I hadn't called a baseball game in, at that point, 4 years. And the first Brewers game I did in 2007 was against the Dodgers, and freaking Bob Uecker's on one side and Vin Scully's on the other side. And I'm going, what am I doing here? And so I remember seeing Vin Scully in the urinal and just about ready, like, oh, what's protocol here? Like, hello, hi, Vin. And he goes, oh, you must be the new boy. And I said, yeah. And I said, well, he at the urinal, we're staring straight ahead. And he goes, well, you'll love the job. It pays well and no heavy lifting. So that was it. And I've been here ever since. They've been great to me to let me spread my wings and go do the national stuff. But I'm a Brewer at heart. I love being in Milwaukee. And I can't believe they hired me. I still can't. I mean, I remember the headline in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Imagine this, like you're going for your first broadcast and it says, Brewers hire golf announcer. Just what everybody wants to have on a baseball game is a golf announcer, as if the Brewers weren't boring enough, right? That was the line I got.
Good.
Yeah. So that's my story.
I love that. We need that. The slug when we tweet this out and put this on Instagram is we're joined by Brewers golf announcer,
right?
Brian Anderson.
By golf announcer, Brian. Yeah. Brewers hire golf announcer. Well, I begged him not to put that out.
About meeting Vin Scully in the urinal.
Oh, you must be the new boy.
Now, I think I've told Dave this. My first road game ever was at Wrigley, and I finished doing the pregame, and I have to come back and do the lineups, but I had to go to the bathroom really bad. And I go into the urinal, and then I'm washing my hands. And it's still the same. It's 2 urinals and a stall. And Harry Carey walks in. It's 30 degrees. Now, this sounds made up, but it's not. And as I'm drying my hands from the stall, I hear this. And he's not talking to me. He's just talking. I hear, I got so many damn clothes on. I can't find mine. And I was like, wait, what? And then I just ran back to the booth to tell Dave O'Brien and Joe Angel, I have the best story. Like, I should just retire now. I'm not going to be able to come up with a better story than that ever. I mean, like,
great.
if I could have sat there, like, if the three of us had sat there and been like, let's put a script together, just a good funny bit on Harry Carey, and Harry, here are your lines. All right, Boog, here is your line. Just, you just got to dry your hands.
Cue the Emmy speech, right?
Are you guys, I mean, every day that I do this job,
yeah,
I think to myself, like, how lucky are we?
Oh.
And I'm not saying that because we're being recorded now. I can't believe what we get to do for a living. I really can't.
What did Steve Martin say? The most important thing of all, I get paid for doing this.
Oh, man.
And, from my standpoint, being African-American, hey, it's not like there's a long list of guys that have done this before me.
Fair enough.
I mean, Bill White,
trailblazer, man.
Greg
You're a trailblazer.
Gumbel. I mean, I'm on a very, very short list.
Yep.
And I hear from a lot of young broadcasters, both black and white, and the young black guys that said, dude, you're the only guy I can look to in baseball.
I know. How do we get better at that, Dave? How does that change? Because I feel the same way. Like I'm eager to help young broadcasters, especially African Americans. I want everybody to have a fair shake and have a chance here. How do we change that?
I just had a conversation with a friend of mine, Anthony Amy at Black News Network, and we were talking about that for a half hour. Major League Baseball, our demographic, as you guys know, is 55 older. We lead the universe in that demographic, right? We're getting killed in the lower.
And white.
And white, absolutely. But that's the big kicker, Boog, no question about it. It's lost the hipness factor that I grew up in Philly. Baseball was everything to me. You kidding? Yeah. And the romance of baseball, I think, has gone away from the black community. We don't have as much father-son tradition handing it down. I mean, my father handed down to me. He worked with me. I worked with my kids. They played baseball. There's a whole sociological thing where we have to spend more money at some point and just get out there and get our guys out there, our white guys, the black guys. We have 10 black guys on our 10 black guys, American blacks, on a 40-man roster coming into the season. We've got to take advantage of that situation and get the word out there. And we got to call in, Junior to rev it up again, Ken Griffey Jr. I mean, I could be here for an hour. All I know is that there's a lot of inequities in terms of broadcasting. I'm not trying to take anybody's job away, but when you look at the NBA, it was 90% black. Football's about 80% black. Eric Collins is the only black local team announcer in the NBA. Network-wise, there's no lead play-by-play guys who are black doing football, baseball, basketball. Play-by-play. You got a bunch of former players who do color. But non-former playing division, I know I'm the only one, myself and Robert Ford and Mike Claiborne, the only black guys in baseball, non-player division, who are broadcasting baseball. Bill White was my guy growing up. When he retired as a Philly, they threw him into Channel 6 WPVI in Philly, where I grew up. And he was the first black guy I saw do sports. And the first I saw do play-by-play. And then Paul Olden came around. He did He did Cleveland, Tampa Bay, and the Yankees. But our numbers are few and far between, man. I don't think there have been more than – I know we've not had 10 guys in the history of Major League Baseball who are African-American calling games.
Well, I know Eric did the Dodgers for a while, too.
Until then when Vin stopped going on the road,
I mean, that's your mission, Dave, right there.
Oh, there's no question. Thank you.
That's it.
Believe me.
Like, that's it.
Yeah, they did a piece on me on Black News Channel, and a couple of guys that I've sort of mentored over the years said, "Oh my God, this is great."
Yeah, it's got.
I mean, Boog, you see the same thing I'm seeing, right?
No question. Yeah, and I think, you know, and the city that we're in, you know, like we both are in New York City. It's obviously it's a very diverse city, but you still, you know, baseball, the numbers in terms of, you know, interest level from African Americans, it's slipping and it's gone the wrong direction for a while. And
yeah,
unfortunately,
I just did a Jackie Robinson roundtable last week for the Mariners.
Yeah.
And Shed Long, our second baseman, he and D. Gordon were talking about, hey man, 5 to 10 large for travel team during the summer. And you know, there's a segment of the black population can't afford that.
Totally.
Right. I know it. It's brutal. And I work in the NBA too, so you know, I see both worlds, and they couldn't be more opposite. You know, when I'm in an NBA arena or NBA culture, just the people even I work with, and we have baseball conversations. Chris Webber is a huge baseball fan. Right. Reggie Miller loves baseball. We talk they always want to talk baseball with me, but again, that's a generation. I feel like that next generation, I don't know, it's a deeper conversation for sure. I feel the same way about women in sports and women who want to do play-by-play, and they feel like, well, we can't, you know, we just don't have that option, and it's just wrong. I mean, I've benefited from it, so I have, and I understand my place, but I'm impassioned to help those who just need at least to be brought up to a level playing field, not put ahead, just to get to a level starting place. And I will always help, always.
To the starting line, not behind. I will tell you guys this, to take it back, and maybe put a, you know, kind of tie it together. But you said, you know, how lucky we are. I love this sport the same amount as I did when I was 6. In different ways, there are different things I love about it. And I miss it. And I miss the job and the energy of the job. But you know what I miss as much as anything? This. I miss the pregame of the 15 minutes that we would do this and laugh, and the connection, the human. I mean, we get it's not just what we do. We get to spend time around a lot of good, fun, interesting people. And I miss that, man. I miss it. I miss seeing, you know, my producer, Jeff Dufine, and director Jimmy Platt, and Sutton, those guys, and Andre, the camera guy. And you know what I mean? And then sharing stories and time and catching up with you guys and laughing. And so it's all of that. And we're doing baseball. Yeah, man, we're so lucky. We're so lucky.
I feel like I can't sometimes, you know, we do games. I can't wait to get to the commercial so we can, and sometimes during the game, we send our text messages. But, you know, especially during the commercials, we'll pop out and we'll, you know, I remember one of my favorite stories I tell involved you, Boog, when we were both there to call the Roy Halladay no-hitter. Boog was on radio, I was on television. And, you know, we kind of walked out of our respective booths at the same time. And I was as white as a ghost, man. I was like, what just happened? And I'm thinking about every word I just said for the last 2.5 hours in that game. It was a really fast game. And I'm just like, what? Did I mess that up or what? And we both like walked out, looked at each other and went, oh, we didn't even talk. And then Marty Brenneman comes out. He was doing the Reds broadcast. He was swearing like crazy, like, I can't believe these guys got no hit. These men are motherfucking.
How do you not get a hit?
And we were just
and the two of us are like,
what just happened?
What just happened?
And then he looked at it, he goes, well, how'd you do? I think it went okay. He goes, well, that ought to make you famous. And he was right.
He's the best.
He's the best. He is the best. But yeah, those moments, you know, that you get to share. Like you're talking about Vin Scully. I remember Raul Mondesi threw out somebody at second base, and not Mondesi, I'm sorry, it was Puig. He mentioned Mondesi. Puig threw out a Ramos Ramirez at second base, and I went over there in the commercial. I'm like, wow, threw him out from the fence on the fly at second base, flat-footed. And this is like right when Puig got to the big leagues, and I went over there and I go, Vin, like, how about that throw, you know? Just to be able to, say, hey, Vin, how about that throw? The same thing we just saw. He goes, oh, you know, that reminds me of Carl Furillo. He had a really strong arm. I'm like, Carl Ferrell. And he goes, oh, but maybe a Raul Mondesi would be somebody you might remember. I'm going, oh, my God.
Oh.
So
Carl
those are
Ferrell,
the
the
things we
Reading
love.
Rifle.
Yes, for good reason. And it's exactly what Ben said. You know, they called him the Reading Rifle. He had a very strong arm. So,
I knew you were going to tag that. That's how
He's
that story's going to end.
beautiful.
Because as well it should. That's the only way a Scully anecdote like that
That's
can
right.
end, right?
There's always, hey, I talked to him the other day. I was watching the 84 World Series, and, you know, we ended up talking a lot those last few years. I had actually, because, you know, I came into the league and he was there at the first game. Anyway, we had a relationship. And so I just said, I'm going to pick up the phone and call him just to see if he answers. Second ring, hello. And I was like, Vin? He goes,
Now
yes,
what do I do?
And yeah. So now, you know, and we talked for 30 minutes, and I'm telling him I'm watching. God, there's so much here. I don't know how long this thing goes, but we were watching. I'm literally watching the 84 World Series on replay, and Vin is talking to me about this and that, and then I'm saying, hey, you know, it's interesting, and we were talking about Al Kaline, and that's very sad. He had just passed, and I was telling a story about all the players loved Al, and they would come talk to him, and he goes, you know, it was different for Joe DiMaggio in that way. And he starts telling me this whole Joe DiMaggio story about players wouldn't come 10 feet, like physical distancing, like nobody came close to Joe DiMaggio. He was just on such a pedestal. And then he goes, but it wasn't that way with Ted Williams. As a matter of fact, Ted Williams gave me a hitting lesson one time. And you know how Vin's stories go, right? And you're like all over the place. But you know he's going to bring it home. And he's like, yeah, I got a hitting lesson from Ted Williams. Unfortunately, I was 38 years old, and it was 20 years too late. And so, yeah. And then to tie it all in, because we had started the conversation, I said, Vin, I'm watching the 84 World Series. Tony Gwynn's at the plate. So we talked for 30 minutes. And then we get to the end of it, and he goes, oh, well, I better get back to, you know, my social distancing. And he goes, now, make sure you call me back and let me know how Gwynn did. From 1984. I said, okay, I'll go back to the box score.
Oh,
said, yeah.
that is so
I think
funny.
he's coming up for the third time now. Oh, my God.
That was on last week. A couple of weeks ago. I remember watching that.
He and Joe Garagiola were so great. Like, it's weird to hear Vin with a partner.
Yes.
Because he never really worked with a partner. And he and Joe were busting on each other the whole game in a World Series game.
Yeah. Is that the Gibson game where he took Goose Deep?
Yeah. That was
the game I was watching.
Well, they played a bunch of them. Trammell hit a couple of homers. They were re-airing them.
Yeah. The one
over
I call Vin the last 3-4 years on his birthday, and his wife will go, Vin, Dave Sims from Seattle, and then just like you say, hello, Dave, my wife.
The best.
And my wife says, you know, I come floating back into the room because I was speaking to His Eminence. Yeah,
it's true. It's like staring into the eyes of the Pope. I interviewed him once, and I literally started crying because he was saying how all these nice things about me, and I told him, I go, Vin, in this conversation when I'm watching the World Series, and I called him, I go, Vin, I'm just here watching the 84 World Series. Man, your play-by-play is just exquisite. And he goes, whoa, that's a big compliment coming from you, Brian. I was like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever, Vin. So what a guy.
So
awesome.
When I met him, I chatted with him, and I told him I was from New York, and he asked, where did you go to high school? You know, I said, you know, I know you went to Fordham, and he asked, where did you go to high school? And I went to the same high school that Anthony Fauci went to. It's called Regis. And without missing a beat, when he asked, where did you go to high school? And I said, I went to Regis. And he goes, oh, well, then you were much smarter than I was. I was like, no.
Jack Corrigan tells a story like that too. He says the first time he met, and all of our stories are the same, that we're reduced to being 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
We're in his presence, right? I mean, Eric Nadel. I mean, you know, everybody. Yep. So Jack says, I meet Vin Scully. I say, Vin, Jack Corrigan. He goes, hello, my Jesuit brother. He said he had already looked him up and knew where he went to school.
That's great.
That?
Oh my God.
Boyd probably handed him a card.
And then the Mario and Pemba story about the Tigers play the Dodgers. Mario goes back and watches a replay of the game, and he goes, freaking guy knew more about my team than I do, and I'm here every day.
Yeah. So good.
He's the best.
I love it. I miss you guys, man.
Yeah, miss you.
Same
This is
here.
awesome. Thank you for doing this.
Of course. It's great to be with you, and let's do it again. And this is fun. It's good medicine for me to reconnect with all my people.
Here. Hey, have a great happy hour, and if you see Mr. Baseball, send him our regards.
I will. Yuke's doing great. I talked to him the other day too. He's ready to get going. He's in Arizona, so he's feeling good, and he's doing well, and swimming every day, and so he's ready for. He's got 50 years in now, so on the air. So crazy career that he's got going.
Should all be so lucky. All right, Brian Anderson, our guest here, announces on for Boog, Sciambi. I'm Dave Sims. We'll see you next time.